Hello everybody and welcome to this E5 special video. Hello Dave.
Hey Paul, how are you? You're over there.
We're finally in the same video via the magic of technology. Now I'm in sunny Southend, and where are you currently sitting?
I'm in my office, so I'm 250 odd miles away from you right now.
250 odd miles away.
Yeah.
And what we're going to do today in this video, we're going to talk about an E5 original theory, something that we've been discussing and researching for quite some period of time, and we thought we'd present it like this for you, having just recently presented it. Isn't that right, Dave?
Yeah, well, this was the last presentation we've just done at the recent Elex events, and it was like the graveyard shift presentation, meaning most people go home. It's a 3:15 slot at a 4 p.m. finish. It was kind of just a considerate gesture for us to do something, so we did this. It turned out we had a lot of people come to it. There was actually, on the second day, the Friday, there were people. We did record it, but the audio wasn't great, which is why we want to do this properly with a good, better audio. But you could see people actually packing up behind the side of the stage. I don't know if you noticed that on the recording that we got. They're packing up behind us. We're doing that, but everybody was listening to this talk.
I was kind of too nervous, to be honest with you, because we spent so long tweaking this presentation when we were tweaking it literally the night before we did it, because we've spent so many Fridays, Saturday nights researching. And so this video is going to give you not just an E5 original theory, but it's going to give you a sneak peek at the future of the electrical industry and what possibly could happen. Now, me and you are not members of the Wiring Regulations Committee known as JPEL. We are independent engineers who have a theory as to what could come. And the reason why we believe this is so important is every time the Wiring Regulations comes out, we rush for training, we rush to buy books, and we're always caught unprepared, which creates a negativity and people complain. So we thought, well, why not prepare people and try and give them some foresight in what is coming so that maybe they can be as prepared as we potentially are. So that's what this presentation is about.
Yes, exactly. I mean, we see it every time. New book, new regulations, new methods, new practices, new technologies, and we have a lot of debates and years of discussion and argument to and fro. And so what E5 wants to try to do is actually look beyond, and hopefully start talking about subjects that will become an everyday discussion, but we'll have them way ahead to give us that opportunity to develop ourselves ahead of the curve.
And I think it's fair to say that this presentation is very much a thought piece.
Yes.
So that whilst the slides are ingrained in facts based on extracts from European standards, as you'll see, this presentation is very much about us combining our thought processes, combining our knowledge, and sharing it with the wider E5 and then again YouTube and UK electrical community. And that's something that the electrical industry doesn't do very well. Yet videos like this, I really hope, can stimulate some great debates and also inspire people to go away and do their own research. So, and this is the indemnity we said at the time. If you don't believe what we're saying in this, go and research it for yourself. Go and find the information, and you may find different parts. And I'm sure after this video, Dave, other industry bodies may hopefully grab the bull by the horns and start talking at their live events about the future of the electrical industry. That would be great.
And that's kind of what we want them to do. We want them to give electricians more respect and start talking about these subjects earlier, instead of just talking in technical jargon, so to speak, and keeping it away and at a distance from them.
Well, they need to. Dave, you remember as much as I do when we first started talking, and the DPC for the wiring regulations dropped 18th edition, and there was me scratching my head and you going, oh yeah, it's in America. And then 2 years of research and trips abroad, and eventually I now actually feel like I know the fundamental principles of an arc fault detection device. But it's taken so much research and so much time.
It took a lot. And we should just mention, obviously, the illustration here shows the rest of the E5 clan who were with us at the event. And They all strongly believe in this presentation. They all took part in delivering this presentation at Elex, but right now it is just me and Paul, just for the sake of sanity.
For the sake of sanity, and I won't be doing any impressions of any of the chaps because I just won't do them justice.
Yeah.
So let's get into it, shall we?
Rightio, let's go to the first slide.
Okay. So, this is a big visual image there of.
It's like a rave.
It is. It's a rainbow of knowledge. It's a feast of mental stimulation. So one of the things that this slide kind of represented, and one of the things we were trying to tell people was we're always in our own internal thought processes, generating new ideas, considering, thinking, questioning. And one of the things that E5 tries to do amongst ourselves, you and I both know this more than most, Dave, is we sound off against each other. And electricians, whether they're on site or they're in a site cabin managing electricians, they're always questioning. Sometimes some doubt slips in, and they need sources of information and data. Luckily, we're in the modern age where me and you can sit 250 miles apart. And we can share that information. And that's kind of what that slide represents. It's about us trying to share that data. And by all means, below, if you want to put comments or questions, maybe the questions from this video, Dave, can become a future podcast.
Well, indeed. I mean, it's important that anyone who actually has an interest in what E5 are talking about has an opportunity to get involved in what E5 is talking about. So do get involved, do provide comment, do provide opinion. That is, I mean, you're just as much part of this slide as we are. It's all about us sharing our own ideas and actually trying to develop the bigger picture as to where we're going to go in this industry.
It is indeed.
Okay, next one.
Yeah.
All right. So we started off with this slide in the presentation just to highlight an area that we always cover in regulations training, and that was to recognize the footprint of the regulations as we know them to be the 18th edition or BS 7671. The footprint goes all the way back up to the European Committee and then the International Committee, and the key number here is your 60364. 60364 represents low voltage electrical installations. What we have in this industry is we have the International Committee, then we have the Senate Committee, which we'll look at in a minute, which then goes down to JPL 64, which is the committee that compiles all the information, decides what we put into BS 7671 and what we put to the side, or what we delay, or what we hold back. But that is the pattern. It all goes back up to 60364. And that's important to understand, because what that means we can do is look at that scope or look at that scale. But going to BSI and the IAT, what we do in this industry is we focus purely on the regs. So every 3-4 years or so, the new book is out, and we have so much attention to the content of the regs, and that's it. And we argue about new technologies, new regulations, but what E5 does is it looks at the bigger picture, in that it looks at the Senelec and the IEC 60364 numbers. So what we do is we look at the regulations that were going to be coming in, and we look at why they were coming in, what trend was happening. We may question why they weren't implemented, or we may just understand that straight away. But we don't forget them and we don't ignore them. We keep our eye on them. And that's what we've done in the past, and that's what we're still doing today. And if we do that, if we do look at 60364 in Europe, we'll start to understand how we can always predetermine where the electrical industry is going to be going.
Yeah, it's a good way of predicting the future, isn't it? Because as you rightly said, the JPEL committee or the Wiring Regulations Committee, there's a number of subcommittees and a main decision panel, and they are the filter, they're the bottleneck that takes all of these IEC and Senelec requirements, and they slowly filter them into the normality of the electrical installation industry within the UK. However, there's a problem with that, Dave, and that's the one that we see and why we're doing this. And that is there's floodgates in every single edition now that's kind of overwhelming a very devalued and a very de-skilled industry. So guys are really struggling to grasp new technologies or technologies that have been referred to because the fundamental principles haven't changed. And it's fairly evident with what you're going to see in this presentation. It's only a matter of time before the fundamental principles, chapter 13s, are looked at
Or rewritten.
Or rewritten, indeed. It's inevitable that Chapter 13 requirements are going to be addressed to cover far more progressive and modern technology. So we kind of do our own research because, again, we're geeks. But we do it and we exchange those ideas, and we almost have our own committee type reviews where we go, this could happen, that could happen. And where is the benefit for the electricians? But more importantly, when this stuff is coming, if people are informed, one of the things I found from the 18th edition was there was X amount of, I think it was about 1,500 comments. There should have been tens of thousands, but a lot of guys didn't want to read because of the size of the book. Now, put that into context, the 60364 suite of standards, there are literally hundreds of them. And we're lucky in the UK because we have one book. But if you look at 60364-7 suite, there are far more special locations in those suite of standards than there are in the wiring regulations. So, the JPEL committee, they very much act as a gate to slowly allow stuff to come in and also ensure that the stuff that does come in is prevalent and relevant to the electrical installation industry. So this literally is a snapshot of what we think would make it past those gate stages.
Yeah. So, referring to Senelec, it's important to know that obviously Senelec is a committee that sits above Europe, and it just harmonizes all of the standards within Europe. But as Paul's just put together, when you go to 60364, there are many different standards, and they have different versions. This is a list of all of the members that are in this group, and that's the darker green. Obviously, the lighter green here are the affiliates, which is an even wider spectrum. When you actually look at a standard document, or you open up BS 7671, it does say in the first few pages about how it harmonizes with the Senelec standard and all the HDs. So again, we look across these, and it's not that hard once you actually know how to search the right number, 60364 fundamentally, then you're in the right bar with BS 7671, and then you're just looking at what else belongs to 60364 that isn't in 7671. Then you've got to decide if it's not in there yet or if it's just a completely different area.
It's also worth noting as well, Dave, it's not prohibitively expensive if you're able to find the websites in, say, Greece or Estonia, where you're able to buy the IEC standards for a reasonable price, because there's obviously a cost to this. So our research costs us time and it costs us money. So we will buy the IEC standards. We don't buy them directly from a UK website. We will get them from a foreign website, because effectively all they do is they just put a cover sheet on when you buy it from England, but the content and the language is the exact same. So we're able to get access to the standards the minute they're published, buy a copy so we can digest and analyze it. But we also know where they're released as well on draft for public comment in the relevant country, so we're able to review early and see whether it's a standard worth watching.
Yeah, that's key. So, before we move into talking about the future, this is just a little case study about what E5 has done in the past. So, Paul, what's this one about?
Yeah, okay. So I have worked in railways for the majority of my life, and August 13th, 2015, which is a long time ago, I was getting into the LinkedIn world, and I wrote an article called RCDs Are Safe, but How Safe Are They? Because I was one of those people who grew up with, in college we were told, if in doubt, RCD it out. It was a new technology and it was super, super safe. And on railways, RCDs tend to not work, especially on third rail traction systems like the DLR, southern England, south of London, where they have third rail traction. The DC is third rail, so it leaks. Positive goes into the train, negative via the tracks, and it can appear on fixed low voltage electrical installations. If that's the case, it can then saturate, stun, see one of our other videos for what it does, and it can cause safety performance issues. So whilst RCDs in their fundamental principle and operation, they are very safe technology, but with the normal operation of external influences, other electrical installations or systems, their performance may be compromised. And that's what that article was about. It was trying to raise awareness of Appendix 5 external influence criteria, because as we know, if you look in your regs book at home, AM7 is DC current in an AC network. it refers you to regulation 321.10.5 or something like that. And the minute you turn to chapter 32, it's non-existent. It's there, but there's no regulations because there's no guidance on how to mitigate. And this is where the railways are quite advanced, which is why we had the DC injection rig built, which we'll see now. So this was a rig that John Ward built. John Ward loves to experiment, melt stuff, blow stuff up. And this was a very simple DC injection rig, just using a simple diode that you could find in a domestic iron. And what he did was able to successfully stun, blind, shock, saturate the RCD so that it didn't perform within the 300 millisecond or 40 millisecond performance criteria.
I believe from the snapshot of the video, it's a 30 milliamp RCD, but it's pulling 0.3, so that's 300 milliamp at the time.
Yeah.
So it's definitely not behaving, that one.
No, it's not behaving. And if we go forward to the next one, this is the rig that you'll have seen on many, many videos. So I like to lend rigs out. This is a very simple and crude concoction. It's a RCD there, and in the video, John is pushing the trip button, but because it's saturated, it's stunned, it's blinded, the circuit cannot generate a stable field because of DC saturation. It doesn't work, and you'll see just on the shunt trip there, the little device next to the DC leakage is 250 milliamp being injected directly into the core to simulate what happens. It's quite scary when you think about a domestic home and how much DC could be prevalent there, could be performing in a way it's not supposed to, with EV charging, PV on the roof, DC sockets, switch mode power supplies, smart homes, modern electronics. There's a lot of problems that could occur under fault conditions, possibly under normal operation. So when we're selecting and erecting RCDs, are we genuinely considering external influences? It's a very, very new and very difficult subject to master, especially in a domestic home. So that rig is just to give guys ideas of if they do find a shocked or stunned RCD, what may be the problem, why it occurs, and what they may be able to do about it. And thankfully in the 18th edition, we now have Type A RCDs, Type B, Type F, etc.
Yeah, I mean, what's more alarming for me is, you wrote the article in 2015. That was that was Amendment 3 of the 17th edition.
Yep.
So the entire life of the 17th edition was all about the escalation and application of more and more and more RCDs for protective measures, for additional protection, regardless.
Which was huge.
It just seemed to be a generation of applying these devices.
Which was one of my bugbears, because when Amendment 3 came out and it was like, right, now we're going to look at lighting circuits and all the rest of it, I had to write a risk assessment that exempted lighting circuits from RCD protection and just stick with the fundamental principles of overcurrent protection, mechanical protection. If a passenger could touch a luminaire, if it was broken, we would put an RCD in, but we had to put a special RCD, which was manufactured to the old BS 4293 criteria, which was made by Blakely. We were a heavy industrial company who helped build the rig, and it was very strange, because I was looking for guidance on the risk assessment and ended up having to go and learn myself the risk assessment criteria and ensuring suitable measures and mitigations are in place. But I grew up without RCDs, so RCDs were always an additional measure of protection anyway, or supplementary as they used to be called. So, and this is where it starts to get interesting. So within BS 7671, we have a number of appendices, and those appendices are either normative or informative. Now, if the appendice is a normative appendice, it means it's part of the standard. It means you will follow it. So Appendix 1 of 7671 is all the list of other British standards. And what that means is you will follow it. You will follow the other British standards. If it's informative, it's there for additional information, for guidance. Now, we're all very familiar with BS EN 6898 for MCBs. 61008 is the modern RCCB, replacing the old BS 4293. And if you combine the two, you get 61009. But this Annex ZB here is from 61008, so the modern RCD. And it says in it, special national condition, national characteristics or practice cannot be changed even over a long period. It affects harmonisation, it affects part of the European standard. For countries in which the relevant national conditions apply, these provisions are normative, so you will follow it. And in Germany, it says the use of RCCBs of type AC is not permitted. In Switzerland, it is not permitted. Having done our research, it's also Austria, Belgium, Switzerland, and Denmark. Okay, so it's quite a few countries. In Ireland, there's a variation of the RCD and there's some additional criteria. But what we're seeing is effectively a banning of type A RCDs.
AC.
Did I say type A? Sorry,
Yeah.
AC.
AC RCDs, yes.
AC RCDs, sorry.
It's a trend. It's a trend that we kind of haven't paid attention to, but it's clearly across Europe been happening for a while now. I've obviously got a lot of work involved in 7909, so I was aware of this issue, and this is from 7909, where it talks about different RCD types: AC, A, B, and F. And there is this little passage in the appendix at the back of 7909. It just says here that AC are suitable for many applications, but temporary systems of the type covered by this British standard, that's 7909, are frequently subject to ACs with pulsing DC. And it again says here that ACRCs are unsuitable. This is something that we've had to take on board, because we test and we install with lots of distribution equipment, and most of the manufacturers of distribution equipment for a number of years just threw in the cheaper RCBOs, which would be AC. There are a couple that would go ahead and put the Type A, but took a lot of to and fro, and even today some of the big ones will just throw in Type AC because there's a lot of ignorance in testing in that area.
It's quite worth noting as well, on some electrical installations, going back a few years, MK used to do RCBOs that were Type A. Square D on the commercial industrial application, they were Type A, and these were Type A's before anybody really knew what a Type A was. There was not really much manufacturer literature out. These were in the days when the internet was just getting started. So their knowledge around the different types of RCD, which we'll do another video on, is now coming into the spotlight for electricians, isn't it?
I think the biggest kind of struggle with this has been getting electricians to understand how the different equipment operates as it's evolved over the past 10 years, how it actually really does affect the AC sine wave with regards to either rectifying it or just using diodes for a little bit of rectification. And so I think that is quite that there's a gap in knowledge there, because it's not in everyday working practice, and so a lot of electricians probably just don't think about that with equipment characteristics.
It's also the testing of it as well, David, because if you think about it, a lot of guys, they'll unplug everything out of the circuit and then test the circuit, when in actual fact sometimes you're wanting to test or look at that device under its normal operation. One of the key things that I always remember is on the railways, when they go to test the RCDs, they will test the RCDs at night time when the trains aren't running and everything's switched off. But during the day, when you've got dozens of amps of DC straight current leaking into the system, that's when the performance of the device will be compromised. But it's not tested then. So it's a really I think with all this digital technology and this DC threat, because I do see it as a threat, that the inspection and testing criteria potentially also may need a slight amount of tweaking, maybe for the inspector to look at the performance of the electrical installation during normal operation. So rather than doing a periodic at night or out of hours, there may be some inherent value in doing some inspection and testing or inspection and observation during the day.
I think it has to. Similarly, with regards to the knowledge of the characteristics of the equipment itself, when we come to look at the 18th edition, we talk about division of installation, unwanted tripping, no more than 30% of the current of the I delta N on an RCD. We need a lot more information now. And if memory serves me, I think Guidance Notes 3 does say that the RCDs should be tested without the equipment connected yet. And so if that equipment's not been introduced, it's not going to be giving off those currents down, then you'll be having initial verifications passing these RCDs without them actually having these currents occurring. So there is a good benefit in the potential investigation to rewriting a bit of that.
Yeah, I think almost, I mean, I would probably create a new inspection criteria almost, where it is literally an inspect and observation during normal performance. I genuinely believe that could be a merit as part of the verification of an existing installation. If you don't have records and information available, seeing how the installation is utilized and performs with normal equipment, understanding the leakage, because we now know that there are IEC technical reports which give you formulas for calculating leakage current that could affect those RCDs. So, yeah, let's move on.
Let's move on. Okay, so let's talk about this.
Oh, I know, it's like Christmas for me, isn't it? Really. So this is one thing that Amendment 1. So as we're recording this, Amendment 1 of 7671 is out as a draft for public comment. And so you can go online, you can comment till the end of November, I think it is. But one of the interesting things that's come out, as you can see from that standard there, BS IEC, so the British Standards Institute have adopted the IEC straight, 62955, came out in 2018, and it's the Residual Direct Current Detecting Device, RDCDD. I don't think many people know about that in the UK. And it's to be used for Mode 3 charging of electric vehicles. So again, Amendment 1 is specific around Section 722 of 7671. So this is an additional enhancement of those protective measures from within the DPC because it references this standard. So at some point, what we'll probably do is look into this in greater detail in some future video content, Dave.
We will, but another day where we have lots of time because it's a bit big.
Yeah, 154 pages. Yeah, 158, sorry. What a read.
Let's save that for another time.
Yeah, let's move on. So note that, RDCDDs.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Coming to a wholesaler near you, eh?
I can't even say it. All right. So, let's go back to the future. Now, when the draft came out, there was a whole Part 8 energy efficiency that was going to be introduced. And going back to what you talked about with the Part 1, fundamental principles, the intention of the wine regulations being to protect persons, livestock and property from the effects of using electricity, burns, fire, electric shock, arcing. This had no place. Everyone commented that this had no place and get rid of it. And they introduced a Appendix 17 for now, mentioning at the end of the second paragraph it will come in the future. So we knew it wasn't going anywhere. It has a 60364 number structure. So we kept our eye on it. And it's carried on evolving. So 2018 time, and it's now been amended. We've had Part 8, 1 and H2. So things to look at here. 60364, 60364, that's low voltage electrical installations. Part 8.1, functional aspects, energy efficiency. H2, prosumer, low voltage electrical installations. We'll come to prosumer in a minute. And you're going to hear a lot of people talking about prosumer now. But these are published standards. The reason they're not in 7671 at the moment is because they decided not yet. But, you know, I believe the IET did write an article in their magazine saying they may or may not consider it. But with the way the industry is moving, they can't brush this one. They can't hide it. It will come in, or it will be appearing in another form. But it's going to get in there. And it's like electricians will have to take on board. And we can't ignore it. So we kept our eye on that, and Part 8, energy efficiency, is now bigger, 8, H1, H2, and they're also now looking at H3, which is the operation of prosumer electrical installations. This is a snapshot. This is all public information on the BSI site, and it shows you right now that up for this month is approval for a start date, with the suggested publication of this third addition to Part 8 being February next year. Obviously, Amendment 1 is coming out very early next year, as long as it's going as planned right now. That 722 amendment, we know that. We know that's going to be a little free giveaway just to kind of supplement maybe some of the lack of effort that was put into 722 in the 18th edition. It's Amendment 2 that's going to be the big one, and we believe it's going to bring this back. Because we've seen that these are being published. We've also seen comment on these other sections. Again, 60364, that's low voltage electrical installations. 557, which is part 5, selection and erection of equipment. If you've done an 18th edition course, you'll be fully aware of the structure, part 5 in the chapters. 5.1, 5.3, 5.4, 5.6, and 5.7's missing. That's because it exists in 603.6.4 as erection of stationary secondary batteries, which suggests storing DC energy, which when we look at prosumer in a minute starts to make a lot of sense. The need to consider producing energy and storing that. We've also seen commentary on these other two, which are 716 and 720, which are two new special locations or installations titled DC Power Distribution over IT Cable Infrastructure, Power over Ethernet, and DC Power Supply Systems in the Data Center. These, well, the 716 is due to be published in 2020. What are your thoughts on this, Simple?
Well, it's worth noting, I think, when you look at the jigsaw that is the IEC standard, you can see there is a cumulative picture being built up where we're going to be looking at a new way of using, delivering, consuming, producing electrical energy. And it's fairly evident the secondary stationary batteries, you go to most houses now that have got the money and they're having Tesla walls and these battery systems put on the walls. So there needs to be specific UK guidance that maps and aligns with the wiring regulations. So it's kind of, we're playing a bit of a catch up, really, which is why we think either Amendment 2 or maybe the 19th edition will introduce this whole new concept of the future of UK electrical installation contracting. Power over Ethernet, you and I both know it's being done by the smart installers now. People are running Cat 6 everywhere. They're running low energy lighting, KNX, etc. in the home. Lots of smart homes with various light sensors and oxygen temperature sensors and all sorts of stuff that can go to your home cinemas and all your apps. So that needs definitive guidance that maps and aligns with 7671. I think the data center stuff, whether that makes it in, again, JPEL being that filter, I think there's definitely a need given the amount of data centers that are being built around the world. But I don't expect to see this in Amendment 2. I would possibly reserve this for a 19th edition or a 19th edition Amendment 1, because I think there's enough chaos and mayhem coming over the next few amendments, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I definitely see 5.7 and 7.16 being together. 7.20 does look like it might come later on.
Yeah, I think anything DC is going to have to come together, which nicely leads us on to reinventing the wheel for electricians. So this slide here, a very simple slide. We know as electricians and homeowners that we are consumers. So they generate the national grid, it gets transformed, it gets then transformed down into local DNO subs, and it gets delivered into our house for power and lighting, and it's metered. And that's the way it's worked since electricity was invented. However, we now have the capability of micro generation, wind generation, solar generation via PV. So we have become a miniaturized national grid producer. So if you're a producer, then there's no point exporting it to the grid when you can consume it. Hence, this new term is being referenced in 60364-8-1, which is called prosumer, someone who produces and consumes. Now, that is a term that is going to become the norm over the next 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 years. It will be a normal term now. We won't be considering a consumer anymore. Everybody will eventually become a prosumer. Some may argue it's to mitigate the national grid is aged, pretty much life expired and virtually cost prohibitive to replace, but also the fact that these technologies are becoming more accessible. I mean, the Tesla roof, the Tesla battery wall, these kind of things, ground source heat pumps, you put that sort of technology into a house with combined low energy products, LED lighting, you're pretty much going off grid. So if that's the case, you need to reinvent and look at the way you're protecting, controlling, and measuring that power. So that's what that slide is. What's your thoughts on it, Dave?
It's something that I've seen a few times mentioned. I've obviously gone into 603.648.2. We can't dodge it. and we're going to see a lot of people talking about it now. We brought in green energy, renewables. They've gradually started to be introduced and evolved. We're looking at, obviously, ways to store energy. With electric vehicles, we're now going to have a presence of batteries. We always, when the old solar came in, it was all about, generating, but then feeding it back. It always made more sense to store it, but it wasn't done at the time. Obviously, with electric vehicles, there will be much more suitability for batteries to regulate the stationary batteries, to store batteries. And it makes a lot more sense to generate DC and keep it DC so you can smoothly distribute it in anything that is going to use just DC.
It's going to raise a whole host of questions, Dave, because when I think of batteries, I immediately think of what I know now. So UPSs. And UPSs need to be cooled. Battery storage needs constant temperatures, optimized temperature control. I live in a house with 9-inch walls.
Yeah.
It's either freezing in the winter or red hot in the summer. So it's going to be interesting to see what other things that this generates. So this is going to stir some really interesting debate, which hopefully you guys watching will be able to go, right, I'm going to have a good old rattle around the grey matter. And when this comes out down the road, I'll have a lot of considered thoughts where I can then contribute towards the changes and the draft for public comments.
Yeah, I mean, it's true. I mean, stationary batteries, as we consider them, or the old battery room kind of batteries, required suitable ventilation, risks of fire. It's a complete bad idea for a domestic environment. But I guess with electric vehicle coming up, and every day they're probably reinventing how to store this energy in these batteries, and it's probably just getting that point where
it's fair to say as well, Dave, that the prosumer won't be happening possibly everywhere. I mean, high-rise buildings. I don't think you'll have the ability to generate that sort of energy to become a prosumer.
No, I mean, there's some illustrations in 6036482 where it shows you multi-story, but they aren't illustrated more than 3 or 4 floors. It's more like those smaller flat areas where maybe you could share a PV array, and you can then store that and use that for your emergency lighting, escape lighting, maybe maybe things like that. But I don't think a multi-story would work. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see how they skew it towards the time. But that's prosumer. It's producing, consuming together. Simple. Okay. So.
This is an interesting one. So when we were reading 60364-2, there was a great term that just jumped out of the page called island mode. And island mode is an operating mode in which the prosumer's electrical installation, note the word we've just used, is disconnected from the public distribution system but remains energized. So those who are watching this going, well, hang on a minute. If anybody remembers the DPC, there was reference to an additional earth electrode or a foundation earth electrode, which caused it. Let's be honest about it, Dave. It caused chaos, didn't it? But it's in there, and I think this is why that 60364-8-3 has come out for operations, because it says the earthing arrangement needed for operating the prosumer's electrical installation in island mode. So straight away, it's inferring that you can switch in and out of different modes, shall be connected to the local earthing electrode. In addition, the one for the public distribution network may also be used. So the way I've seen this, and there are drawings that show different configurations, is yes, you will be connected to your DNO, but at any one point you may be able to switch that out and use your own local earth electrode network as a local earth reference. It's going to change the rules of the game, isn't it, Dave?
It's going to change some of the design requirements as well. I did have a little preview in 6036482, and it starts talking about things like, your earth fault currents. You've got to have minimum and maximum, because obviously you've got to make sure that if you're on the DNO earth that you achieve that. But you've also got to make sure if you do disconnect from that supply and you're now an island, so to speak, you're on your own little network, that you have a earth fault current sufficient there as well. So there's an adjustment to make in those designs, which will be fun to work out.
Interesting to know what the lettering scheme they use for the island mode earthing is, because obviously we have TNS, TNCS, TT, IT. Be interested to see if they invent a new term just to cover the island mode.
Maybe, yeah. I've seen island referenced a few times with common earthing systems.
One thing, Dave. So if you go back to the 16th edition, Amendment 3, me being a bit sad here, there was a section on generators or other sources, and there was actually a reference to switching out of the DNO electrode, DNO earthing, if you had an alternative power source. So on the underground, we had like a 30 kVA UPS, and obviously if you went through a cable or there was a DNO power loss, where you was obviously had 30 kVA of power being generated within the station, you would get a certain amount of leakage current. Now, one of the requirements was to switch out that earth so that you couldn't potentially injure the people working the supply cable.
Yeah.
So this isn't new.
No,
This isn't new.
no, it's just sort of something that's going to be probably out to a much wider scale.
I remember asking Tony Cable about this years ago when he was on the tech line.
Did he say, "I'll get back to you"?
Funny enough, he did ask me what I was working on, and yeah.
Yeah, so there is going to be some interesting design adjustments. I might actually do some more investigation into 603, 64, and 8 and have a little look see at it. Okay, so we've looked at 603, 64, 8, 1, 2, 3. We've looked at 720. We've looked at 57. So we've had a little think about, okay, when all these do come in, which might be later in the life of the 18th edition, it might be that such large change, it does come into the 19th edition. We don't know. What do we think this is going to mean to the typical domestic installation or the small-scale installation, rewiring houses? Are we going to have adjustments to the minimum requirements of our design? So this is what we've come up with. Looking at the fact that we're going to start storing energy under 717 as a consideration, looking at the fact that the power over Ethernet has been brought through, it's worth considering that under IEEE standards, they are now looking to increase the amount of power you can put over power over Ethernet up to 60, maybe 90 watts, depending on the cable arrangement. Bear in mind that that is enough to power up your typical television as illustrated here. This is just a 43-inch smart TV. It makes sense, if we can generate DC power, to not then invert that to AC power, to then transmit that in the home or in small-scale installations as an AC circuit, to then convert it back to DC, to then use it. It makes sense to distribute and utilize DC for energy's sake, clean energy. And if you think about in the home, how much of our equipment with lighting, and you mentioned KNX earlier on, is switching over to DC in some fashion, it does make sense to generate, store, and distribute DC as much as we can.
And that, of course, links to then the new potential Chapter 8, which we think will come in Amendment 2, worst case the 19th edition, which is going to blither on constantly about saving energy, reducing losses within an electrical installation. If you remember, Dave, we were talking about in Chapter 8, there was some additional requirements about reducing the loss in circuits, AC circuits, and we were thinking that we'd be going from 2.5 mil radials and rings to 4 mil, and basically upping our cable sizes to reduce the losses, which be interested to see if that comes back in. But yeah, you can see that this potentially is going to happen. It's inevitable.
So what do we think then, Paul?
Well, so we, as everybody watching this, hopefully will, when they finish this, listen to our podcast, which are also on YouTube. Myself and the genius that is John Ward, we've done a couple of podcasts where we discussed Amendment 1 and the potential future electrical industry. And this was a little dream I had based on, I'm a big fan of the double stack high integrity boards. And if we look at this one on the screen, the bottom of the board is a standard split load or RCBO configuration, which a consumer will normally use. Power in from the grid, comes in from the cooker, and output to the electric vehicle car charging point. But on the top deck, what we've got is a potential DC. So I'm predicting that we're going to end up having AC at the bottom of your consumer unit and DC at the top. And if you can see there, there's some switching ports, which potentially could then run power over Ethernet to run your televisions. When you look then also at the developments of certain boards and products, So, for instance, the Schneider Isobar P, where you can monitor every single circuit, real-time energy, tripping, power loss, frequency, all sorts of stuff. It's inevitable with the outlay of arc fault detection that there is a possibility that we're going to have smart boards with the ability to upgrade potential software or hardware within the protective devices in real time. Also, if you've got that capability, you may end up being able to offer an IP address for your board to your consumer so they can monitor in real time. Car manufacturers can monitor in real time. Electric energy, green energy storage companies can see how you're consuming and far better inform the national grid. And as you can see there, you've got a battery storage system, you've got solar, you've got microgeneration wind turbines, all of that stuff. It's pointless generating in DC to convert it in an inverter to AC, to send it down a cable, to then convert it in a rectifier to run something which either needs DC or will convert it internally to DC. And I think that's where the future will be, probably when me and you are about the age of retirement. But I can see this coming pretty darn quick.
Yeah, I mean, it's worth mentioning that in 603.648 there is a huge mention on monitoring and management systems. So there's going to be a lot of opportunity for the manufacturers to get their switchgear and their protected devices connected to the internet of things like your Schneider. It'll benefit AFDDs if we can obviously have them connected for updating any potential patterns that may slip through the gap later on in life.
I think this is going to be a generational thing, though. I think we're going to have generations, as we know with AFDD, we had the 2 module, now we're down to 1. I think over, say, a series of 5-year chunks, we're going to see upgrades of or new generations of protective devices that are smaller, better components, and can obviously be far more compatible with smart tech. So the electrician isn't going to be bombarded with, you must buy a £2,000 smart board. At the moment, people are saying, I'm not buying a £2,000 AFDD board, whereas we're saying at the moment, the best thing to recommend to a consumer is separate RCBOs with Type A because of the nature of this new DC equipment we have in our houses, with possibly 1 or 2 arc fault detection devices on what we would determine those high current, critical circuits that you want to protect. And slowly, this is not going to happen overnight. But the last thing you want is all new metal boxes and lots of meter tails and Henley blocks and just a sort of Frankenstein's mess of new boards.
Yeah, I mean, it's the 17th edition had a 10-year life. If we were to assume the 18th edition, it might have the same 10-year life. They may shorten the life. 16th edition had quite a long life, I think, compared to that. But they may shorten it to a 10-year life, again, to bring in the 19th, to then bring this in. We may start seeing this creeping in towards the end of the 18th edition life. But I reckon in 10 years, this is fairly expected for me.
And a lot of the guys watching this are probably going to go, oh my God, I can't wait till I'm retiring. And you know what? When the 17th edition came out, I was so angry. I was just so enraged because I thought, why do the regs have to change? And then I researched it that with technology the way it is, it's always going to have to change. Now, you can either look at it as a negative or a positive. I always say to contractors, see it as a positive, and I'm sure any contractors that go to NIC or ECA or NAPIT roadshows, hopefully they'll be told the same. It's an opportunity for 2 things. One, it's an opportunity for your business, but more importantly, it's an opportunity for you to upskill early or decide the direction of your business. What training do you need? What training do your men need? How much labor are you going to need in the future? How can you create a business case to give the best service to your customers? If we just take the voluntary bodies, so ECA will be looking at how contractors benefit from this. The NIC will be how can their membership and their QSs benefit from this? How can they upskill them? NAPIT will be, obviously, as well as their contractors, the inspectors. As we said, I genuinely do think with look at all this technology, there is going to have to be a fundamental rewrite or an addition to the inspection and criteria framework for electrical inspectors, because there's nothing at the moment for prosumers. And I genuinely think there will end up having to be some bespoke stuff. But then again, you and I both know, Dave, it's work from the regulations. They're the minimum, not the go-to argue and fight over it. It's work from it. And I think we'll end up with early adopting contractors developing their own inspection and testing criteria or framework to capture all this sort of stuff. What's your view?
I think that's right. I know, for example, with the qualifications as they are right now, the apprenticeships. When the renewables came in, we amended with a minor adjustment with environmental legislation, and then we obviously introduced defined training. But something like this would probably rewrite part of that, and most electricians would have to seek some level of training to. Well, I say they'd have to. It would be requested upon them to obtain training when it comes to this kind of thing landing in the industry, and it's up to them now to really decide how much attention and effort to play on this. And they might start upskilling early. They might start just researching, doing some CPD along the way.
And it's worth noting, Dave, this industry is so diverse now, as in there are so many different terms or understood definitions of an electrician. So, for instance, if I'm a one-man band domestic guy, this means time out of work. Do I want the aggro? But can I see an opportunity here? I think, and the message from me to everybody is, it's coming one way or another. I know this video is an assumption, but as hopefully you'll see, it's based on a fair hefty bit of research. And even if only 50% of what we're telling you makes it through, there's still a level of upskilling. There's still a level of, and again, when I did my photovoltaic City and Guild, I remember the guy said to me, wire the output of the inverter into the top of a breaker, which just blew me away. When we were learning RCDs when they first came out, earth leakage, blew me away. Now we've got AFDD and we're saying there's a little computer that monitors the sine wave, blows you away. But if we can help the industry understand in some very simplistic terms, then hopefully it will give everybody an appetite to go and upskill. And I'm sure, Dave, we will do many, many videos over these once we know more over the years.
Yeah, well, that's a good point to start with this this last slide, really. The objective of E5, influence, inspire, inform, educate, support. Inform is part of this journey, and we want to work as much as we can to help motivate, support every electrician to take this on, to look into it, to stand next to us and go, it might happen, it might not happen. And, if we start looking more, we start seeing it discussed more. We've already, since we started doing this, since we did this presentation last week, we've already seen a couple of areas of the industry suddenly bring this subject up. Suddenly talk about it all of a sudden. So, yeah. And what we don't want is for electricians to get frustrated. We don't want electricians to get pissed off. We don't want them to get angry. We want them to say, okay, well, how can we find out more? And we want to start talking to each other. And we want to look open to the future, understand where the industry is going to head, and say, right, well, should we start preparing now? Should we start just doing a bit of CPD, talking about it a little bit? That's what E5 is here to do. And we'll carry on talking about it. We'll carry on studying this ourselves.
Yep.
It's never finished. We're learning more and more as we go. And we will probably reprise this with an update on what we find later on. But, this is just the beginning of a journey, but we need to start talking about it.
I think it's fair to say, Dave, when the 18th DPC came out, I was starting to get over my 17th edition anger and angst, and doing the research on the DPC, creating that early PowerPoint, which we gave away to people. That became the backbone of a lot of research, and I think I up-revved that one presentation about 15 times based on changes of understanding, knowledge, better use of visualization. But for me, moving forward, I think one of the things I want to do is every time the wiring regs, somebody would say, new edition coming out, you'd roll your eyeballs. What I would love, guys, is for them to normalize in the fact that the wiring regulations are going to ever continually evolve throughout their career. We're one of the few trades where the technology has to drive improvements in our knowledge and application and use. I mean, if you're a bricklayer, you can knock up muck, you can knock up bricks. But even the bricklaying trade, all the new ways of building is having to make them become a little bit smarter. With electricians, we were always the scientists on site. So I would love it if Sparks would turn around when they join this industry and they go through their journey in this industry to say, well, the wine regs are always coming. I need to be on board and be accepting there are new changes coming. And hopefully I can contribute to their commenting and moulding of that criteria in the regulations, because that would be a really cool thing if you could pick up a regs book and go, yeah, I contributed to that bit. You know, that would be really cool. I mean, I would love to think somewhere that article I wrote in 2015 and the knocking on doors hopefully got and maybe the guys to decide, yeah, let's now introduce in the 18th edition Type A RCDs. The industry now needs that knowledge, even though AM7 there's still no guidance on DC and an AC network. But we need to inform people. They need to be aware of the risks when they're selecting and erecting an electrical installation. And I'd love it if guys would just get used to, normalise the idea that the wiring regulations are going to constantly ever evolve. And as an electrical contractor, they need to see it as a real opportunity for themselves and their company. Yeah. That would be really cool.
It's as you always say, you know, we need to look at working from the regulations. And I mean, looking at the behaviours around ACRCDs, it would take a lot of consideration now to start installing them without, you know, a great amount of information, understanding about the characteristics of the connected equipment. Because with the attitudes that are happening in Europe and everywhere, you know, we could be potentially in a number of years actually starting to code against ACRCDs when used, depending on the equipment that they're connected to, which is a complete 180 on what we've been doing for 10 years. But if electricians look at the deeper levels of information that is available, most of it's freely available, and don't just look at the flat regs book and actually look at building on top of it. And that's what we'll always try and do.
It's kind of that engineering judgment. I've always said to people, building or selecting and erecting an installation is a journey of engineering judgment and logical narrative. And even when I was doing the USB video, when I found out the potential risk of surge protection of an installation causing USB sockets to become damaged, so I said in my video that could potentially be a C3. I genuinely believe in 10 years' time, people may be coding this stuff C3. I believe that the ACRCD, when I get to my age of retirement and the manufacturers have sold all their AC types, will possibly be a C3 or a C2. I do wish the industry, electrical industry, and I'll say it out loud, had a body which would more stringently enforce decision making. I mean, the fact that 7099 has said no AC types, I genuinely believe with the technology people are bringing into their house, I think it is inevitable that wine regulation should be, if anything, setting a date or saying in the 19th edition, we recommend by Amendment 1, ACRCDs will not be installed by default. And I think it will be slowly to give the manufacturers a chance. But a good and competent electrician, if they understand the harm DC can do, and they're dividing their installations better, why not?
Yeah, I mean, going like they've done in the 18th edition right now, using the words, you know, that ACRCs are sort of for general purposes can be it could be confused by so many. By not knowing what that means. What does general purposes mean?
We were asked the other day on social media, do you put an RCD on distribution circuits, like power distribution, submains to boards? And no, I wouldn't, because I don't see the need if it's an armoured cable and it's distribution. But then again, if it was a TT installation, you'd have it at the origin. Again, you really have to consider the impact of your distribution. You know, do I want an RCD tripping and impacting my lighting system, my revenue generation on railways? No, not necessarily, because I can distribute safely to a board and then protect the final circuits that I know unskilled or persons may have access to in normal contact. Again, it's just that breaking down of installation rather than going everything's RCD. Then you've got a huge selectivity or discrimination, whatever term you want to use, issue getting them all to comply. And you know, discriminate or be selective, sorry.
Ionization.
New term, old term.
Wonderful. Yeah.
So, I think that's about us done, isn't it, mate?
I think so. I think, we've just brought this presentation to everybody now. It's, again, going back to the beginning, we've looked at the behaviours, we've looked at the documentation, we've looked at what's been reviewed, we've looked at what's been commented on. So we know what is going through the machine right now, and we are coming up with a opinion. That's what this is. Okay, everyone has an opinion. We voiced ours, and the intention of this was to share it, to allow other electricians to start thinking ahead. We want you to have a few years head start before the industry starts to say, you must now do this, and you start being shocked and having, to pay out for all these things. That's what we're trying to do here. We're just trying to give you a heads up.
This is definitely the definition of us trying to inform you, and hopefully in informing you, we are supporting you in your future decision makings, and you will hopefully go away from this and decide to educate yourself on the new and the current systems that you may not have done yet. That man there, if you haven't done your 18th edition, fantastic online course, absolute legend for doing it. Thank you, Dave.
All right.
And I'm sure there'll be more because sparkyninja.com launches in 2020, which will be great.
Yeah.
We'll still be doing our magical E5 mystery tour in the new year. So stay tuned for news on that. Dave, any final words before we close this out?
No. I mean, we're going to do a couple more things. Check out the podcast because we'll have more guys talking on the podcast. We've had great feedback on the podcast, and that just inspires us to talk more on a podcast because we talk nonsense or technical stuff a lot. And a lot of people find it very informative and very educational. So if you haven't heard about it, go and check it out. If you have got it subscribed, there'll be more very, very soon.
It's on every single platform. It's a new thing for all of us. But basically, we all get together in random pairs or the group of us, and we just talk about various issues. If you want us to talk about anything or you want us to expand, if you leave a comment, we're not going to ignore you. What will end up happening is me or Dave or someone will go, that's a good idea, formulate some plans and put it into the ether of development because it takes ages and ages and ages to develop this. Especially the free stuff, but we also hope you're going to remember that you saw it here first, you heard it here first, because we would like to push maybe the industry into being a bit more transparent and freely giving with that free CPD and knowledge. Is that fair to say, Dave?
It's fair to say. It's fair to say that we're trying to. I mean, we're trying to open industry up to be more transparent with itself because it's filled with organisations that try to lead each other, try to beat each other, but they, to break news or to do all sorts of things. But transparency is the problem.
And it's fair to say that we don't really care about what those organisations do. What we care about is giving back to the electrician, the man who sits in his van by himself, or the guy in a site cabin who wants to know, but it may be too shy to ask the question. We want to be that support network. And give back because everybody should have the ability to do whatever they want in their career. And on that final note, I'm going to end with my usual words. Dave, you're a legend. Thank you very much for your time. And until the next one, take care of yourself and each other.
See ya. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.